This episode of the podcast has been brought to you by Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is an inclusive, socially conscious PR collective that puts their money where their mouth is. They have a current roster of bands that reads like a greatest hits anthology. Brainiac, Catholic School, Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Oceans in the Sky. I mean, the list goes on and on. They also do PR for record labels such as A La Carte, Arctic Rodeo, Steadfast, Rad Girlfriend, and so many more. How do they pay it forward? How do they put their money where their mouth is? By generating thousands of dollars in annual charitable donations to the likes of Women in Vinyl, Coalition of Communities of Color, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and many, many more. The man has the receipts. I've seen them. It is real. The artists, labels, and podcasts Sweet Cheetah works with are curated with an eye on working primarily with friends. You could find Sweet Cheetah on all of the social media platforms, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just look for Sweet Cheetah PR, and they will be there. He's been Tim, I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful. I would. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter, and I am still here. Happy Friday the 13th, everyone. I had to go through some of my existing unreleased episodes to find the band that I would think would really embody the darkness that people attach to Friday the 13th. It's not really anything, but we have this vibe about it, right? Who better than Drowse? Drowse is on the Flenser. They are a one-man project driven by Kyle Bates. The new album, Wane Into It, has a special edition that includes a short story that is bound and slipped into the vinyl. It's beautiful to look at. It's incredibly heart-wrenching to read. And if you're going to go out and buy this from the Flenser, I suggest you buy the special edition. The story is called Cloudlight Over Obsidian, and it is well worth a read. Before we get into the episode, I want to remind you all that we are still open for business when it comes down to, becoming a member. And with that membership, you will get the record that we are putting together gratis. You will get one episode a month that no one else has access to. You will have access to a special store that is only for subscribers. We also take donations if you don't want to subscribe on a monthly or yearly basis. But if you really want to support us, the best thing to do is go to Instagram or Facebook and share when episodes drop. Follow us, like us, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And your ears will be our payment. We would appreciate it so much. Trust me. So, I want you all to understand something. Friday the 13th is here. We've been through all the spooky holidays, and I know I like to play up to that stuff, and the name of the podcast is the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast, but it's an off-putting name. I'm starting to really see that. I'm not going to change it because that's who we are now, but it's not, I don't even interview people. I build relationships with these artists. And I think if you give us a serious listen, you'll glean that from it. And you will feel like you are also a part of that relationship. And I'm being really, really silly right now, but that's how I feel about it. So, Without further ado, I give to you Kyle Bates of Drowse on the book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. You just released a single, Three Faces, and it's cyanoacrylate. Am I saying that?
Cyanoacrylate.
Cyanoacrylate.
That's a mouthful of a title. I would just call it Three Faces. That's the subtitle.
The subtitle, is that the chemical name for cyanide?
No.
Okay.
That's the name for like disappearing glue, like super glue or magic glue. It's like the I forget the word for it, but like the chemical that makes this happen.
Right.
Yeah. And so that kind of process is a big metaphor that's used in that song. Something that is like seemingly disappears but sticks with you.
That's a pretty good metaphor, actually. Strangely enough, do you know what super glue was invented for?
No. Tell me.
During the Vietnam War, they needed something in place of sutures or staples to use for triage in the field, so super glue was born.
That's brutal.
Isn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah. So listen, right off the hop, I don't know if you know anything at all about this show, but I always start off with one question, and that's basically the only like question I have written. Everything else is kind of like in the form of conversation. But the question is, what is it that terrifies you on an existential level?
Can I do two answers for that?
You certainly can, absolutely.
Okay. The first one, I don't know how like anybody would not say this, but of course it's death in every form, other people and myself. Death in general, how could that not be everyone's biggest existential question that we're fighting with or thinking about our whole lives, right? And then for me personally, the other one is like a loss of self. Just because I'm bipolar, so I've had times where like I felt like a totally different person. And so that idea of like being detached from yourself or like, I don't know, losing your ability to remember like the person who you were at a certain time period is really scary to me because I've experienced that. So those are my two super heavy answers, I guess, for that question.
Well, all cards on the table outside of the fact that I'm, perpetually in recovery. I too am bipolar, and I am no longer medicated for it because I've come to find that I have less instances of, mood swings if I'm not on something. If I'm on something, they get worse. It's the strangest thing.
Yeah, it's actually the same for me. Like I used to have to take lithium, and that was like super rough. But that was a long time ago. And then I tried different medications, but I found that really just being on top of it, especially with like sleep, and self-regulation in different ways is like the best help for me. And I haven't really had like a really bad manic episode or anything like that for a long time. So it's strange. It's also, I feel like something that can change with age or experience too, but I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I've been on every lithium. I've been on Seroquel was one of the worst.
That was the first thing that I got, and that was very fucked up. Like total loss of self when I'm talking about that. Like you lose your days with that.
Zombification. When I'd first met my wife, I was on 150 milligrams of Flenser, and I think like 40 or 50 milligrams of Seroquel in tandem.
Yeah. Well,
this doctor was just like tasing me, basically, like,
Yeah.
And she's like, you need to throw those out because I can tell there's a person in there somewhere, but I can't really see him right now.
Yeah, that's fucking terrifying. But also, I've experienced that. Yeah.
And for my listeners who don't know what that's all about, Seroquel is an antipsychotic. Flenser's your normal run-of-the-mill serotonin reuptake inhibitor, but Seroquel is an antipsychotic, and it's meant for people who go into psychotic episodes, which I did not. I was just, I'm your average run-of-the-mill bipolar manic depressive human.
Yeah.
But that was a slight case of overbombing with that.
Yeah. I had like one psychotic episode maybe 10 years ago, I guess, at this point, and only one, but that's why I got Seroquel, and it did help. Like it like drag me out of it, like forcibly, like grab me by the hair,
Yeah.
But then after a while, it was like, this is like destroying my sense of self, or and then with SSRIs, I actually can't take them because I have something called serotonin syndrome. So like when I was getting prescribed them, I would just get like sick and throw up and feel really bad for days.
Oh,
and I didn't know what was going on. But yeah, now it kind of sucks because I feel like that actually could be something that would help sometimes. But yeah, I can't take them.
fuck. That sucks.
Yeah.
Oh God.
But having said all that, I feel like I've been pretty on top of it for a while now. So
Well, I think it comes down to self-care, really, and knowing when it's time to kind of back off and, recollect yourself.
yeah.
It's difficult to do in a family setting, but once people start to recognize, like, okay, I got to let this guy do his thing for a couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool that your family is like down or knows about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have kids or anything yet, so I don't. I hope that I can find people that are like your family. Like that sounds great.
That's a thing, like you said, it comes with age. I mean, I didn't get
Yeah.
married until I was in my 40s.
Mhm.
I had my second child at 43.
Mm.
I have a 3-year-old. I'm 46, and I have a 22-year-old who's away at school. But within the family unit, if you don't have that kind of an understanding of a person's, downfalls or whatever way you want to put it.
Yeah, psychology,
Mhm.
maybe.
Yeah. But getting away from, actually, it's not getting away from this topic, but
Mhm.
your new record it's palpable. There's a depression to it that, I mean, you could write dark music all day and it could be like, the Sisters of Mercy, where it's like, as much as I love the Sisters of Mercy, that it's
Yeah.
just an aesthetic.
Yeah, I mean, I also love that shit too. Like, I love
Yeah, love it.
aesthetic darkness as well.
Yeah, me too. But like, there's an existential and a quintessential darkness to
Mhm.
this record that, I mean, your other records are also very dark, but I think this one is particularly dark.
Mm.
Like it's all over it. Like if you rub up against it, it's going to come off on you. That's the kind of feeling I get for it. So I have a pretty like slim idea of what headspace you were in going into this, just via an interview or two I've read. But could you kind of like give us like shine a little light into the dark corner of what it is that inspired this?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting that you say that, because I think my last records, like Cold Air and Light Mirror, the last two, were coming from much darker places. Like Cold Air, I was really drinking a lot and like taking a lot of benzos, and it was like a bad headspace making that record. And then Light Mirror, I was also like just in a bad way with like social things, other people, and kind of self-isolating a lot. And so this one, Wane Into It, is actually my most like stable record, I would say. Like I spent 3 years on it, and like everything's very intentional. And like it's funny because I've actually had two other friends say that they're like, "Oh, this is your most hopeful sounding record," and they have the opposite reading that you do. But of course, there is darkness. So like one of the big things, there's a couple big things. One, my grandma died like right before I was making this record, and she's someone that I was really close with, and was like the only other person in my family that was an artist, that I could like kind of talk about these impulses and things with. And I felt very understood by her. So that happened like to 2019. And then my uncle in 2020 took his own life. And this is like kind of one of the main concepts of the record, or things that I started to think about, because he had us all like go to this weird Airbnb like right in the middle of the pandemic and have like a memorial for him. But it was like, okay, I'm gonna kill myself, y'all. Let's talk about me. And it's fucking bizarre. Like, I don't know. He had a lot of substance abuse issues and stuff, and like it kind of makes sense with his other behavior, but it was really intense. And we're all staying there for a couple of days. Like his kids are just like devastated and like, don't, begging with him, like, don't do this. And then like a couple months later, he did it. So that was like kind of one of the things that happened right when I was making the record. And for me, that just got me kind of like thinking about like self-memorialization. And I think like as someone I sing about my mental health issues and I sing about my life. And all these records are very like first person, about internal things that are going on. And so I'm like, well, I do this too in art. I think that's like a big function of a lot of the art I like. But then when does that become this weird self-absorbed thing? When is it a problem? Or like, there's so many huge questions around that I was thinking of. And it's like, not like I feel like I'm directly answering those things with the lyrics, but that's like kind of what was bouncing around in the background, like these death and then also this other layer, which is like social media. And during the pandemic, we're all like online so much. And that's also like a curated like version of your experience of your life, right? And that like creates like a myth of who you are as a person, if that makes sense. So like that's the other kind of layer to that I was thinking of. Sorry for rambling. It's kind of hard to weave through it all, but that's like some of the general themes. And I think all of that shit's pretty dark because it requires self-reflection to think about or to listen to, maybe.
Having said that, do you see where I would glean a darker vibe or a darker theme to this record than the others? I mean, although yes, the other ones were very dark, coming from very real places inside your own spirit. To me, this one seems like it's the most externalized,
like sonically, like musically. I definitely can see that. And I don't think that was intentional either. Like when I'm writing these records, I don't really set out to with all of Drowse, I'm pretty like anti-genre,
Oh yeah.
I kind of just go into it like, okay, I'm gonna make something and here's what comes out. And so I can't really explain like, oh, I intentionally made this darker, like slower or something. But I think some of it has to do with like the instruments that I'm using. Like I was way more into like synths and like nerding out on modular synths. Like I have this Buchla. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That I got that when I was making this record, and it's fucking amazing. But stuff like that is like very unstable in terms of tuning and like really dissonant, And so if I'm using that sort of equipment, I feel like that it just even unintentionally maybe makes it like a harsher environment, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember sitting down sometime last week and really kind of dissecting sounds on this record. And I made a list of some of just free association, like other bands that you don't sound like, but that there are instances where I could see you would have been listening to something like this.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about it.
So here goes. First and foremost, there was a band in the late 90s called Antarctica. It comprised of members of Christie Front Drive. I don't know if you have heard of either of these bands.
Okay, yeah, I've never heard of both of this. I'm going to write that down, actually. Antarctica and Christie Front Drive.
Christie Front Drive was a early to mid 90s, what people would have called emo, but in all actuality was indie rock.
Mm-hmm.
They morphed into this symphonic, synth-induced and synth-inflected, gorgeous, almost like a soundtrack style soundscapes. And that they called themselves Antarctica. That came to mind. And then more, I guess more on the rock end of things, Slint, Jerome's Dream, Unwound, and Catatonia.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually have like some tattoos from Slint's like self-titled 10-inch, right? This is like the artwork from inside of that. I got those when I was like 18. It was like my first tattoos because I was so obsessed with that band growing up. And I feel like my guitar playing style is like totally indebted to listening to Slint and Unwound. Like Justin was like a fucking major influence. Catatonia, not at all. Like I'm a metalhead. Like I grew up listening to a lot of black metal, especially, and a lot of like 80s thrash and like crossover and stuff like that. But Catatonia is a band that like I never listened to. I've always been aware of them, and I'm like, this should be up my alley. But a band that is kind of similar that I really liked growing up was Agalloch.
That makes sense.
They're from Portland, where I was from, and they were like putting out records when I was in high school, so that was a big influence.
Big Agalloch fan. I remember being like a teenager when the whole church burning thing started happening. And I forget what world news station picked it up, but I remember my mother questioning me, like, hey, don't you have like a t-shirt by that band? I'm like, Mom, I have a t-shirt of every band involved. Like, let's just don't worry about that.
Yeah.
But I could pick up that love of that, but I also pick up like Lust Mord with some
Yeah.
of the synth
Yeah.
stuff, and like Daniel Johnston, like just a weird like mishmash of wonderful things that they're disparate, but they
Yeah.
make sense in this context.
I mean, all the people that you're mentioning are like super intense in certain ways, and often like very direct. Maybe even if it's like less more, it isn't direct, but it's direct in the darkness of it. You know, it has like it emanates a certain atmosphere or mood, and so yeah. I mean, I think all of those people are people I like in some way. Yeah.
But when you first like had the impetus to sit down and create initially under the name of under this
Drowse, yeah.
name Drowse, what were you going for? What was the initial intent?
I mean, honestly, so I'd say I've been like releasing records that I would consider like real or fleshed out for like 5 years. Like Cold Air came out in 2018 on the Flenser. That's like the first one that I actually felt like I made something that I was proud of. But before, I've been doing this project for like 10 years, basically. Next year will be the 10-year anniversary. And so the first tape that I did was like 3 songs. It's all kind of more like ambient electronic sounds. There's one song that's kind of, I don't know, shoegazy, dark wave sort of thing. But honestly, like when I started Drowse, I just had gotten a copy of Ableton and I was like learning how to record. And I was really obsessed with like the album Replica by One Tricks Point Never. That came out the same year that I was like starting, or around the time that I was starting this project. So like, and Tim Hecker, like a lot of ambient and like experimental music was like kind of the jumping off. But of course, all these rock bands that I've been into forever were there. My Bloody Valentine, like if you listen to that early stuff, it's much more dense, you know, wall of sound. And then like my biggest influence, I would say, is like the microphones in Mount Erie, and then also Grouper. Like those are like my 2 favorite songwriters that I've also been into since I was a teenager. So that stuff is like inescapable. And I think both those people are artists who are sort of genreless but draw from a lot of things. And I really like that idea, you know.
I'm actually obsessed with the idea of genrelessness. I've brought that up many times on the show. The bands that really resonate with me the most, be it Lycia or Neurosis.
Yeah, I love Neurosis too. That's another touchstone.
They're my all-time favorite band. Steve Von Till's been on the show. Thankfully, Scott Kelly is not, because wow. Because fucking wow. But I there's I halfway feel for him, because I understand he does have mental health issues.
Yeah.
But when you're hurting your family, you know what I mean? It's rough. But like, I always kind of like go back to Neurosis, Lycia, and like maybe a couple like Discharge, you know, just as these like points of reference for bands that may have been associated with genres, but they didn't really fit there. And I think that's what's pretty unique and really great about Drowse is I can't say this is this isn't shoegaze. It's not a shoegaze band. I'm sorry. It's not really.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of hate it when people say, like, I get lumped in with that because there's a lot of pedals and sounds happening, but to me it's not shoegaze.
No, and there's not that there's anything wrong with that, because I happen to have come up when that genre was really popping off with My Bloody Valentine and the like, and Slint, who weren't shoegaze either, but they got lumped in with it too.
Yeah,
that's when it was still like. That was a thing. It was a blanket term that people threw at them. It was almost like punk. Punk was a way to like make fun of them.
Yeah.
You know, it
had negative connotations. Yeah,
absolutely. Shoegaze had negative connotations because they were, they're not exciting. They just stand and look at their feet. They're shoegazing.
Yeah.
And that's not what it was. And that's definitely not what you are.
Yeah. Thanks.
To me,
I mean,
it's more like the cross section between like dark ambient and folk and metal. You know, there's so much going on in the brew of that. You can't really throw a tag on it other than this is Drowse music. And that's a wonderful thing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's like one of the goals, and I'm also like big time indie rocker too, so
Oh yeah,
that's inescapable. But yeah, I that's why I really like the label that I work with, the Flenser,
yeah,
because
very
like
varied.
yeah, the whole label is kind of like that. Like I think they started out more as a black metal label, but now you couldn't really tag it with any one thing. And then also a lot of the bands on that label are kind of like a little bit genre resistant too. I
Yeah,
mean, there's definitely some like meat and potatoes black metal bands and stuff, but I don't know.
hi,
It's like
Catherine Moore's on that label. She's the
yeah,
farthest thing from black metal I can possibly imagine. You know.
yeah, exactly. Her music's beautiful, and also like I couldn't put a genre on that either.
No, no, and nor should you, nor should anyone. I think that's kind of what's, I don't know how old you are, but I think that's what's kind of special about what people are calling Gen Z or what have you.
Hmm.
Like, they don't really care about that anymore. That's not like a big touchstone for them. Where,
Yeah, and I could see that making some people angry too. I'm gonna be 30 next month, so I'm like a millennial,
yeah,
uh, technically, right? But a lot of my friends are Gen Zs,
hmm
and I teach like recording and production and stuff at Cal Arts right now, and all my students are like 18, so uh, I see this a lot, and like in some ways, I love that idea of like things just being kind of barriers collapsing and like it's because of the internet, but
yeah.
also kind of in some ways I hate it.
Well,
Because like I grew up, buying CDs and tapes and stuff, and like I love discovering music through looking at liner notes and spending time to listen to a whole fucking album and stuff. And I
yeah,
really don't like it when I think of people like listening to my stuff and like listen to one track on a playlist and then it's like a completely different genre or like whatever sound of artist. And that's I think that's fine for some things. It's not like the sort of stuff that I'm trying to make is really um something that you have to like go into, where that's how I would hope people listen, is like taking this album as a whole. And so I guess sorry, I feel like I'm like an old man
no.
rants at cloud right now or something. But I do wish that the attention spans were longer or something. With a lot of what I see, my students are younger people that I talk to, like their listening habits. Does that make sense?
It does, because to me, I think what I have witnessed in my lifetime was the death of the long form album.
Hmm.
Um, Attention spans are obviously getting smaller, and there we do have examples of bands who put out short albums. Back to Black Sabbath had 8-song records, but bear
Hmm.
in mind that was still an hour-long record because those songs were sometimes very epic in scope. But
Yeah.
now you see even like examples in popular culture, like for a few years there, everybody from like Kanye West to Nas were putting out 7-song records, and that was a record. That was an album,
Yeah.
because no one's listening front to back anymore.
Yeah. It's all singles.
It is a singles driven market more so than it ever has been before. And does it bum me out? Of course. Is it going to change because my generation's bummed out about it? No, no. We're like the old guys at the show who are kind of creepy now. You know what I mean? The Gen X people are like, our time has come and gone.
Yeah.
Like, I'd
I
be the
don't.
old creepy dude with the ratty Gorilla Biscuits hoodie in the back, just like standing there with a beer, looking around like, do I belong here?
Yeah, but that rules. um, yeah. So like, I don't know, that idea of attention spans is sad, but the idea of like a lot of Gen Z artists coming out and the genre is completely collapsed, and you can listen to a song that is like fucking jumping between so many different worlds of sound. Like, I think that's awesome. And
It's great. It's great from an exploration standpoint, and
yeah,
just strictly as a listener, but as a fellow musician, it can be very horrifying.
yeah, that
You
makes
know,
sense.
I grew up in the time when we used to tape trade with complete strangers. We used to go in the back of
Hmm.
fanzines and like, oh, okay, I want that, that, and that. I'll trade them this, and this, and that's kind of the way you discovered things.
Yeah,
It's still like that now, just on a more immediate and digital uh,
yeah,
scale, but you still know what you're getting into in this day and age. Back then, I didn't
yeah,
know what Biohazard sounded like when I asked somebody for a Biohazard cassette, and it was like a 10th generation. It
yeah.
sounded terrible, but That was the
Okay, yeah,
beauty of it.
that's a really good point. Because another thing that kind of bugs me is like this idea of like curated playlists around genres and stuff, and or like this band is like all these other recommended bands. Like, um, I don't know, it just leads to like a narrow thinking in a way. Like I like this idea of like Biohazard, great band, but like you're listening to it for the first time, you don't know what it is, and you're actually experiencing like this joyful sense of like discovery or exploration instead of being like, oh yeah, it's another shoegaze band from this playlist. I know what I'm gonna hear before I hear it. You
Yeah.
know?
How do you feel that you've been escaping that? Because it seems like you've been doing it quite well. With the exception of people calling you shoegaze, I don't see a lot of I don't see a lot of mention of you as far as being lumped in with this, that, or the other. It's just kind of like take it in at face value. Is that
Yeah,
is that because of your association with the Flenser, or just the way you've been moving?
I think people also say slowcore a lot. Does it like that too? But I don't know. It's just like as far as escaping it within my own songwriting and stuff, I just
Yeah,
try not to think about that when I'm
yeah,
working on things. Like I literally spend just hours recording different sounds, and I make it all by myself, so it's all multi-tracked on laptop, and sometimes I'll record other friends, but I'll take those recordings and chop them and utilize them. And so like when I'm playing my synth or my guitar or whatever, I'm just recording, and it's kind of like whatever is coming out of me at that moment. So I really don't think about it in terms of genre, and then I start structuring it based around like the sounds that I have themselves. And then lyrics are kind of the last process, that usually comes out of the sound of the song.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's just really kind of willful following my gut, if that makes sense. Like there's not a plan in a way, but I think it's all cohesive because it's coming from like the same person's brain. And
Yeah.
like I have all of this media and frames of reference that are like really deeply ingrained that work their way into it, like we were talking about, Unwound or Slint or something. I think that label is really nice too for association because it's also hard to pin down. And like I think with Flenser stuff, people often go to it because they don't know what to expect from like a new band. Like that Catherine Moore record is like very different sounding than a lot of the other stuff on the label.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, and then other than that, I don't know. That I don't know how to. It also, other people's perceptions of things that freaks me out. Try
Sure.
not to think about that part too much.
Well, how does this translate into? Have you taken this like into the live setting?
Yeah, yeah. So Drowse is like very, I would call it modular live. Like there has been many different variations of the band, and I've also moved a lot over the past few years. So like right now I'm in LA because of working on a degree, but I was in Oakland in the Bay Area for a while, and then I was in Portland for a lot of my life in different parts of the Pacific Northwest. And so when I was in Portland, I've had like many versions of like a band. Like I've even had, there's been like a 6-piece version of Drowse that played live. The kind of the first one that started playing shows was like really heavy sounding. And then there's like more indie rock. It just depends on who I get to play my music.
Yeah.
Um, and then over the past, like probably since 2019, I started doing more solo shows. Um, just because I've moved and I was like got asked to play on the East Coast with my friend Tom, who does Planning for Burial, and I can't afford to like fly a band out there, so I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just do this. And that version's totally different too. It's like very sparse, and none of this stuff sounds like the recordings usually. And I
Yeah.
like to think of live and the recorded world as like for me two separate things.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Because it'd be a lot of MIDI, a lot of sub mixing from the stage. There'd be a lot of technical aspects to that could be very daunting.
yeah, and also a lot of things that I don't like to see live. Like I'm not a huge fan of if something sounds just like the record, but it's one person and it's a lot of backing tracks. Like I do use samples and stuff sometimes live, but I always get bummed out when I see someone playing and it's just basically the record playing and they're like singing over it.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I could see that. And I've seen some good examples of that, like seeing Godflesh as many times as I've
mm,
seen them. I've seen them with and without a drummer. Still equally as good, just because there were at least 2 to 3 people on stage and it was more of a show. And Justin K. Broderick knows enough to get out of the idea of just playing along to his backing track. He leaves it open, there's triggers.
Yeah. I mean, to me, having a drum machine is different than like having the entire song playing in the back or whatever. Drum machines are cool.
Absolutely. But there's some. I'm actually very intrigued to see you live because of this, because I'm not hearing what I'm going on the record, what I'm going to hear live. I think that's actually the idea of that's very fun. I know that might bum some people out, like, oh, it doesn't sound like the record. To me, that's more fun because you're getting something unique out of from the price of that ticket. You're buying an experience. You're not trying to buy the record again.
Yeah, that's like way more important to me. I think we talked about Neurosis. I think they're an amazing live band that like kind of expands on the sounds live, and maybe there's some improvisation there or something. But I love this idea of like the live thing actually being its own individual experience that you're going to. And I think for me also, like the way that I would prefer people to like listen to my records is like probably alone, laying in bed with headphones or with monitors or whatever. And that's not what you do when you're seeing something live. So like, I feel like I want to change it a little bit for that context too.
So the lyrics for this record that are, they're brutal. They're brutal. I think they match the sound very, very well. But the single is like, Three Faces is something to behold. If I were to present any song to anyone who hasn't heard Drowse yet and came up with the perfect example of this, of what to expect, I think that would be it.
Yeah.
I think that was a bit of very straightforward marketing on your part to have picked that particular song, because I think it represents, if not Drowse on the whole, this record very, very completely. It gives one an idea of what they have coming next. You know what I'm saying? So break that song down lyrically for us.
Oh, that's a hard one. Okay. So let me think about it for a second. I'm gonna like actually pull up my lyrics so I can go through it. Because I actually finished this record like a year ago. And like this song, like it has like that metaphor that I was talking about glue.
Yeah.
And it also has a lot of it is about just memory. And then it also has like this idea of like what I was talking about with the loss of self, or like a separation of yourself. And it's like the second verse is commenting on me as like a dumb young person, like 18 to 20, making all these mistakes and feeling like a separation in who this was, because that was the time when I was super manic in ways. But let me go to, I'm just going to pull it up really quick. So I'm going to look at specific lines. There's also like this whole part of this song, like the last chorus is about feeling like my parents are getting old and kind of like seeing traces of them losing their memory or relating to the world in different ways, and me wanting to like kind of escape my life in Portland or different situations and moving away, but then also having this tether because I'm like so concerned about them all the time. But sorry, this song is like there's like a lot of different things in each section. Okay. So one sec. It's always hard for me to talk about lyrics. Okay, so it's like the first verse is I want to fly so far away that I'm forgotten to remain impressed in those I never knew. Magic glue disappearing and cementing, strong and hidden, self-extending. So it's like about this idea of like wanting to escape a situation and leaving it, but then also like, we all have this anxiety about wanting to make an impression on other people, not being like untethered or alone in the universe, right? And so like wanting to keep that, but wanting to escape something negative. which maybe I won't talk about that stuff, but refers to a lot of different personal things. And then, yeah, it has some big existential questions. Like there's this line that's like, is knowing actually a real thing? Is it all just thought and feeling? Which is, I don't know, for me, the big thing. Like I don't really believe in any concrete ideas about death or even about knowledge. Like, I like science, but I think it's a human construct. And
Yep.
I think that religion's a construct, and everything that we do is a contract. And so like a lot of like, if you're interested in this stuff, if you think about death or like meaning, a lot of it is just figuring out like, well, what is meaning? Like, how do I actually know something? Right.
Yeah.
And is it just a totally subjective experience all the time, and it mediated through my eyes and my ears, and no one else can have that? Or is there any sort of like real, that was shared between people? So sorry, it's getting philosophical with that, but
No, that's kind of what I was looking for, because in my
yeah,
opinion, lyrically, this is you're positing some very, very important questions about existence, about the human
hmm
experience, about am I really feeling this? Is this something that like everyone goes through? Am I just in a simulation? Is this just a movie I'm watching? Like if I
yeah,
if I reach over here, does this person really feel me, or is it just my experience?
yeah,
You're asking some very big questions with that, and I think it's important for us to broach that and to, you know, allow the listener to kind of get a feeling of where you were coming from without having to spell it out for them. And
yeah,
I think you've done that pretty appropriately. Uh, but going through it, there's no real finite conclusion, because there can't be.
yeah,
And that's the part that's the hang up, right?
yeah. And that's why, like, I think in a lot of my songs, I kind of repeat like similar ideas. Like I'm exploring, these big picture of death, memory, whatever, because there's no way that you're gonna have an answer for any of this stuff. And so, like, a lot of my lyrics would be kind of like maybe sloppily stumbling around these questions and trying to answer them for myself in that moment, but that, also with this recognition that there is no answer. And I think that when people think there's an answer, that leads to fucked up things, like fascist things, or whatever. Any ideology that thinks it's like the right one
Yeah, yeah,
is
it's
usually bad.
it's inherently fascist,
Yeah,
because it doesn't leave room for nuance.
yeah,
And I think that's important for people to understand too. Like if you think you have the definitive truth and everyone
yeah,
else is wrong, you're the one who's messed up, because
yeah. You better fucking look at yourself.
yeah, you got something very, very wrong going on. Um,
Yeah,
and I could see that for the entire record lyrically. It is just like stumbling around what we all do, but you're succinctly packaging it in a really unique and beautiful sonic box. And
thanks.
I
Yeah,
think that's what all of the best songwriters, bands, musicians, artists, writers, that's what we're all
hmm
trying to do. We're all just trying to manage our own realities, and telegraph it to the world at large to see if we could get something back from it.
Yeah, I had a question. I was listening to like one of your other podcasts, and I think you mentioned you write horror
Yes.
too,
Hmm.
right? So, do you feel like when you're writing, I'm a huge horror fan also, but like when you're writing like within this genre, do you feel like you're using that as a way to ask similar questions sometimes?
1,000,000%. I think every horror piece I've ever written is semi-autobiographical,
hmm
and it's a metaphor for something that I've actually felt and experienced. And I think any writer worth their salt is doing exactly that.
Yeah.
So when I call it horror, it's probably a misnomer, because it's more like I'm writing existential dread, and
hmm
that's what I concentrate on. I mean, are there supernatural elements to some of the things I write? Of course, but I think the world is a very preternatural place in and of itself. So I'm just,
hmm
is it really that unrealistic for me to, posit these questions about the ethereal, about what one would perceive as a ghost, but is actually just an energy of some type?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
hard.
that makes sense.
It's hard to really like chisel out a genre for that, but I grew up loving Clive Barker and Stephen King and all
Oh
of that
yeah, I love
stuff.
both of
So
them. Yeah, horror is cool too because I think this is like probably has been said a bunch of times, but especially with film, it's like something that just allows you to get away with asking weird big questions and like addressing subjects that are really uncomfortable and like still have a budget for that because it's like, oh well, if we throw some gore on it, then people are going to come watch it, you
yep.
know. But then within that, you have so much room to play around. And I also love gore and I love scary like being scared.
Yeah.
But I think that probably works the same way with horror fiction as well. Um,
Well, it's like that. That's why we have people like Lars von Trier, because
yeah.
he moved in like somewhere between drama and horror
Mhm.
in certain aspects, but it's all existential dread.
Yeah.
All of it, from stem to stern, everything he's ever done is about the dread of existence, the dread of how finite our lives are, and a lack of meaning is the most terrifying idea anyone can imagine. And that's what he's questioning constantly. And I think that's what you're questioning with your music. And there's a parallel between them, even though you don't really get into horror fiction or horror literature. There's a through line there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obsessed with horror movies. So like I think that maybe some of that mood comes from that, especially like the like Lucio Fulci, like the
It's my guy.
Italian. Yeah, he's the shit. But that is like that has a mood and like this palpable like atmosphere that's very physical and like tangible, even though you're just watching something.
Mhm.
And so like that idea of constructing like this kind of atmosphere is important to me, like with sound, right?
Yeah.
So I'm definitely influenced by horror as well.
Well,
And
how could you not be influenced by The Beyond? That is quite possibly one of the greatest films ever made,
yeah, it's beautiful.
and it makes no sense, and it doesn't have to.
Yeah, and that's like part of why it's beautiful, I think too. Um, yeah, okay. I'm trying to like I had a thought when you were talking about your own work and um maybe I lost it. I don't know. Sorry, I kind of space out when I'm trying to talk about these big picture things. I feel like I'm
Sure.
better at writing about it. Yeah.
Well, otherwise you'd be out there, doing the spoken word circuit. That we all have
Yeah.
to find an artistic way to telegraph these themes that we're stuck in and obsessed with and living with on a daily basis. That's why that's like you'd said, the horror opens you up to a greater audience, just because if you were to come right out and say it's this A, B, and C emotional
Yeah.
journey, people are gonna be like, yeah, you know what? Go Princess
Well,
Hide yourself. I want to see blood.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, you also need like to give people like some sort of I mean, this is funny to say in terms of like blood, but some sort of pleasurable experience or an aesthetic experience that they can enjoy while they're chewing on this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because like I also read philosophy, but that's like very difficult and it's not fun to do. Like it's something that I have to sit down and kind of like force myself to do sometimes. Um, and so like with songs, I think that's of course a great format because like you could not listen to any of my lyrics and like enjoy it, like if you enjoy these sorts of sounds that I'm making, that's cool. And same with like the Beyond's a good example. I don't think it's like maybe the good example of like addressing super deep themes, but it is a good example of something that you can just watch and it feels good to watch because it's so masterful and so like the colors are so beautiful.
And it's so unbelievably obtuse
Yeah.
that in a way it seems like he's trying to temper chaos.
Yeah, it kind of like makes you want to watch it again to figure
Mhm.
it all out.
Yeah, and I've watched it probably 5 to 6 times a year since 1987,
Well,
and I have no answers. I have nothing for you. I just would not live in that house in New Orleans. That's all I have to say about
yeah, don't go there. Don't go in the basement. It's a good advice.
that. Don't live in the house by the cemetery.
Yeah.
Don't. What was the name of the town in the Gates of Hell? Dunwich.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, don't move to Dunwich.
Yeah. If a place is called Dunwich, don't go. If it has witch in the name,
Yeah, you're done.
maybe
Yeah,
avoid it.
but
Okay, I remembered because you were talking about Lars von Trier.
mhm.
Do you have like a favorite one of his?
I'm between Antichrist and the television series he'd done in his early career. What was the Kingdom Hospital?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm
I like Antichrist is really good. I saw that when I was. What year did it come out?
Antichrist came out in the 2010s, I
Okay,
believe,
yeah,
or maybe a little before.
yeah. I saw it when it came out, and I was like really disturbed by that movie. I haven't
Hmm.
watched it again because it was like so brutal. Um, and my favorite's probably like Dancer in the Dark in terms
That's
of like crushing existential weight. Uh, yeah, but he's difficult because it's like I don't know, he's a very controversial figure, right? And
yeah,
he basically like I also love Bjork. He made Bjork not want to make movies again because the experience of working with him was so uncomfortable,
yeah.
you know? And that movie is like transcendent to me. Like it's like one of my favorite films, but also knowing that is like really complicated.
I think all of his films are very reminiscent, although not aesthetically, but in mood alone to Stanley Kubrick, even down to
Hmm.
the fact that they're both controversial figures, both incredibly difficult to work with or for.
Hmm.
But is that the price of genius? I don't know. I can't say. That doesn't make him a good person, but he is a brilliant
Yeah,
artist. You know,
yeah, and same with Kubrick, of course. It's hard. That's like a really hard topic, and it's funny because nowadays I feel like it would be impossible for someone to like start out and be that much of an asshole and
yep.
like be that controlling as a director or whatever like medium you're working in. Like, so that begs another question of like, are there amazing works that we're missing out on because we don't accept people being dicks anymore?
Yeah,
Um, and
possibly
is that
because
okay? You know, because there's already so much stuff in the world. But
in
yeah,
2022, could there be another Shining? No,
yeah,
it wouldn't happen.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
there's no budget for something like that.
no, but there's no room for someone to be that uh, emotionally transgressive toward
Yeah,
the people working for them or with them. You
yeah.
know, so it does. Yeah, it does beg the question: could we do it? Could it be done in a kind and in the spirit of reciprocity?
Hmm.
Doubtful. Doubtful.
Yeah, I feel like to make that movie now, like you would have to like be very clear with the actors and have them sign a waiver or something like I'm going to push you to your breaking point and you
Yep.
have to be okay with that to sign up for this project, you know.
And if you were to watch any sort of anything with Shelley Duvall now, I mean, what was she? Did she have mental health problems when she was born? Probably. Was she
Mhm.
helped by working with Stanley Kubrick? No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up.
It is. It is. But that's why I think the only true singular, like art that could be singular of vision, is making music by yourself,
Hmm.
writing,
Yeah.
or like painting, drawing, things of that nature. Once you open up to collaborators of any scope,
Hmm.
uh, it's not really a singular vision anymore. It's a collaborative effort, and that's fine. I have nothing against that at all.
Yeah.
Every band I was ever in was a collaborative effort,
Yeah.
but it's never what I intended in the beginning, and there's no way it could be. But when I write, it is 100% me.
Yeah. Yeah, that I mean that's like most of the artists I'm drawn to. Like I said, my biggest influence is like Mount Erie and Grouper. It's because they're both solo people.
Mhm.
And like I'm really into a lot of literature too. And it's because it's like an unmediated version of like one person's thing. And I think that like each individual human has something interesting or they have a different perspective. And so like I love that idea of like getting the raw thing from one brain. um I also write short stories a bit too, and I actually think that is way scarier than writing music.
Mhm.
um and I don't know if you feel this having played in bands and being a writer yourself, but do you feel that like when you're writing stories it's more raw or anxiety inducing?
It is, and I lose myself in it. And the only time I've ever felt that outside of writing was when I was doing like harsh noise, like
Hmm.
death industrial stuff, like back in the 90s. When I would make that music, I would go places mentally, even though there's no lyrics to it or anything. I would go to places where I'd be like, I'd be fucked up for 2 days. I couldn't sleep. I'd just be,
Oh, geez.
like it would bug me out. And I would just have like one synth, a microphone, run through a distortion pedal, and like some other pedals that are meant for guitars, but I'm using it for my voice, which makes
Yeah.
for very brutal, blistering soundscapes. But it takes a lot out of you too. I think that's why people like the people involved in White House or any of those other harsh noise groups,
Hmm.
they're some strange cats.
Yeah, the power electronics people are always kind of scary or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Um, but with the writing thing, like that's to me the reason that is so intense is because with music, like we have abstraction, like we can hide behind these layers and stuff, and you can do that with writing. But like everybody speaks language, like everybody can look at a sentence or a word and comprehend it on some level,
yeah,
right? And with like music, it's like the barrier for entry is different. Like you have to like get into something, and I mean maybe it automatically speaks to you, but also at the same time it's like you don't know exactly what someone's trying to say as
yeah.
quickly. Does this make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's a more intimate affair, and it's I guess you're just you can't, like you said, there's just no hiding behind anything at that point, even if you are kind of burying things in allegory or
Hmm.
illusion. There's no getting around the fact that it's written in a language. If you speak and read the English language,
Yeah.
there it is. There's your entry point. So it is a very intimate ordeal.
Yeah, it's like there's a certain vulnerability there that
Yep.
I mean we have with music, but at the same time, it's like to me, I can throw a bunch of distortion on something, and I have a layer in between what I'm doing and what someone's understanding about it.
Yeah, it insulates you.
Yeah.
What are you going to be doing now? Like, as far now that this record's out, are you going to be like touring this a little bit, playing some shows?
Yeah. So I have a release show on the 27th of November in LA, and that one's going to be really cool because I'm playing solo for most of it, but then the band Sprain, who's also on the Flenser,
Mhm.
um, also a very unwound kind of indebted band. They're going to be backing me for a few songs, and I think that'll be cool. And then so like right now I'm teaching, so it's a little bit hard for me to find time off work, but I plan to tour a lot this summer if I
Mhm.
can. Um, yeah, Drowse is weird because it's also like I actually really prefer recording and writing music, and I'm a super anxious person. So like
Mhm.
playing live is like I've done it a million times, but it's always hard. There, like I've never had a show where the whole day wasn't colored by me being like freaking out about having to do something in front of people.
Yeah,
So yeah, playing live like really takes a lot out of me. Um, but I want to tour more on this record. I've toured in the past, but for me it's always a daunting prospect. um yeah.
I think it's tough for anyone who's creating music like yours to, kind of take on that endeavor of playing live. It's not like, my having grown up playing in primarily hardcore bands and primarily being the vocalist in said hardcore bands.
Mm.
I'm screaming my ass off, running into people, like diving into the crowd, doing that whole thing. So, I mean, is it intimate? Is it me? Yes and yes.
Yeah.
Am I still layered behind the fact that I'm screaming, and I could basically have a complete meltdown on stage and everybody would think that was amazing because
Yeah.
it's a hardcore show. If I were
Yeah.
playing your style of music, or even if I was just in like a Texas is the Reason style indie rock band,
Hmm.
the expectation's different.
Yeah, people want to hear the notes in the right places or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I've also played in a lot of different bands, and like if I'm just playing guitar or playing bass, I have no problem playing live. Like I love it. Like, but the second that it is me singing and singing about things that are really personal and having to do everything, or especially solo do everything, it's like then it gets fucking hard and scary. But I could play bass in a band all day and like want to play a show every night. You know, it's so fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different. I mean, like we'd said before, this is basically just you. Even if you have a backing band, even if you have people playing with you, it's you are distilling something that you'd written and you've recorded and, you know, firing it through the prism of a live spectacle. So you're still the focal point. That's daunting. That's daunting.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. Ugh. Tough. You're brave. You're very brave.
Thank you. Well, you too for writing books. I want to check it out because I literally just like listened to your podcast this morning a little bit, and I heard you talk about writing, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Now we can talk about horror.
Absolutely.
But I'd love to check out your stuff after this.
I'll send you some stuff. Absolutely. If you were to kind of distill what your career in this musical endeavor has been into like one phrase or one, you know, mission statement to someone who has never heard it before, what would you say to them?
It's really hard. I mean, in one sentence, it's about like exploring and mapping out my own mind and my emotions and self-discovery, and then hoping that other people can listen to that and relate to it and maybe do the same themselves in their lives, you know. So it's self-reflection maybe would be what this project's about. I mean, and go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious. Especially like, I know people, like you said, people think this is your most hopeful record. I'm not taking anything away from that. Yeah. But from my purview, it seems more, like I said, less, this isn't just a personal thing anymore with this record. This is, you're allowing yourself to be affected by the world with this one. Whereas the others were more singular of focus. Like it's you're explaining.
Okay, yeah, that's like spot on. Like I do think this is something I hadn't really thought about, but like the last couple records were really about like specific, you know, mental health episodes or like life experiences. This one is a lot more like, I mean, the world is fucked up right now, so that was seeping in a lot more like thinking big picture, people, humans. Here's what I think about this shit. I don't know.
I mean, I think anyone with a conscience is being like affected by how negative the world is around us. I just went to vote in the midterms a few days ago, and it was horrifying.
How so?
Just the amount of almost religious fervor surrounding a party of politicians who don't care about the people that are not only voting for them but flying a flag for. I mean, I'm not here to say you're bad if you're a Republican or you're great if you're a Democrat, because I think those are both untrue statements. As I am 100% independent, I don't believe in either party because they're both wrong. But you know, the fact that people go and vote against their own self-interest so willingly, so blindly, and so with such a lack of information, it's terrifying. And when you say Nazi, people get twisted up over it, like you wouldn't know a Nazi. I'm like, well, I would, because unfortunately I was a part of the punk scene in the 80s, and there were tons of them, and this is how they acted.
Yeah, that's scary. I mean, I would identify as a leftist, but
I am a leftist for sure.
But I really don't like liberals, and I think that our system is fucking broken, of course, and it's all just money, you know. So, but it's a scary time right now because there is like a religious feeling around one party, you know, and then the other party there's like a detachment, or like, you know, the like Democratic Party is like so fucking detached and like out of touch with what their voters actually want that it's like, it's really depressing. So like either way you slice it, it's pretty scary and weird. And maybe it's always been like this, but I feel like we're just more privy to it because we have like this constant access information. And maybe it hasn't always been like this either. I think it's,
I don't think it has, because I've been voted. The first time I voted was for Clinton,
mm-hmm.
and as far as the presidency was concerned, and when I went to vote for Clinton, I wasn't mobbed by Republicans who were in a tizzy in some kind of like religious uproar.
Is that what was happening when you went down there?
Yeah, yes, and we're voting for the House of Representatives. Like this is important for sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
But to the world at large, the voting for the presidency is like the ultimate. Although that person is just a puppet and a figurehead.
Yeah.
This is the one that matters, and sadly, it looks like it's turned. The tides are turning toward people who want to control women's bodies. People want control. Like control. Like it's not about control anymore.
Yeah. And it's hard to understand why that is, except for like this, I think this idea of religion, or like this idea of like being fanatical about something, is a big distinction, because it's like this is what you see, like super right-wing people like going out and doing these like insane intimidation things, and like doing things that like maybe I would think were cool if I agreed with the ideology of it, but it's horrible, know? And I mean, honestly, I probably wouldn't think that was great either, but I don't know. They're very bold, and it makes sense why that is gaining traction amongst like people who are growing up and just getting into politics. And they're like, well, these people really care about this, and they're going out in the streets and doing this scary stuff. And that can be maybe, I don't know, fascism can be contagious or something.
It is. And it's Christo-fascism. And that's the part that really freaks me out, because if Christ were walking the earth currently, Christ would not like these Christians.
Yeah.
Because of course, if you want to buy like the Bible within the context of the New Testament, Christ was always the Prince of Peace. Like do unto others as you would have done unto you. Judge not, lest ye be judged. That was the whole vibe. Now it's judge. I'm judge. You're this. You're that. You have to be this. You'd have to do this. You're un-American. That's just like we founded this nation, like escaping religious persecution, and the second we got here, we persecuted the American Indians on a religious level.
And that was the justification for it too, right? Like manifest destiny. It's so fucked up.
So maybe this is just the chickens coming home to roost. I don't know, but I don't want my 3-year-old to have to live through this. And wow, we got far afield there.
No, I completely agree with you though.
Yeah, it's just I think this era, this time in history, if we make it through all of it, will be remembered and will reverberate throughout whatever future is to come as being a very very dark black eye on the face of this nation.
Yeah. And how long has it felt like this? Like, I don't know how I would define it, because it's like you could look at Trump, but I feel like it, things were building before that. In my own personal feeling about like how anger and the way that things are going. And then all of this just ties back into like, this is like a cloud of knowledge and like constant information and media cycles that is like hanging over our heads. And like when I look at the internet, I get this, right? And that also colors like the way that I'm living out my days. Like I feel like just having this constant like kind of like chatter about like people fucking wanting to control other people is like rubbing off on all of our mental health in a way too, right? Like it produces anxiety. It produces like nihilism in a way. Like it's so easy to lean into that impulse for me to be like, ugh, I just don't want to listen to any, fuck it. But like I also deeply care about these things. So yeah.
It's easy to fall into the Jean-Paul Sartre of it all. You know what I mean? And become very nihilistic on a philosophical level. And to a degree it makes sense, but it doesn't remedy how much that poisons your spirit.
Yeah.
And that's the part that makes me feel bad for people like these zealots, people who are overly fanatical about anything.
Yeah.
I kind of feel bad for them because their inability to see and disseminate nuance renders them blind, and that's horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, all of that ties into like some of the broad things I'm talking about on the album. I think I mean I'm not making I don't know, every thought that we have is political, but I'm
Yeah,
not making pointed political statements, I think, on it. But the worldview is a political one.
absolutely. And it's you're not in the clash, but
Yeah.
the personal is still the political.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
a lot of it's just about the example you set too. I think if you move through the world with some semblance of kindness, you're going to receive some of that back. Not always, because people suck, but
Yeah.
you'll also, I think you'll also kind of like telegraph that and attract positive spirits your way as well. At least I'm being
Yeah.
hopeful that that's the case.
I'd like to believe that too.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll go with that. I'll go with that, and if I'm wrong, oh well. I'm just trying to find my water. Don't mind me.
No, that's so good.
So this record,
I'm
as
gonna
I
pour
said,
some water too.
yeah, go for it. It is the most varied in scope, but I think also like taking the lyrics and the meanings behind it out of the equation. I think it is a more electronic affair
Yeah.
in a way. Yeah, and you'd mentioned the modular synths and the like before, which you always had synths involved, but I think
Yeah.
they're at the fore more, to the point where the vocals are even affected in such a way that it feels they're still warm, but it feels like there is a technologically affected aura around the vocals.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually the vocals are produced in a really similar way to the other records. I mean, it's just uh, reverb on the synths, but I think one thing that's different is that I got better at producing things and understanding, vocal compression and stuff. So there's that. But then I also started singing in like a octave, like higher register,
Mhm.
and I do a lot of like doubling with my own voice. So like I think that kind of creates like this sort of uncanny valley because you never hear someone like speak. I'm not speaking and then having a higher version of my own voice speaking, and on this record, a lot of times that's blended in, so you can't really pick up on it. But I think that could definitely lend to that feeling of it being electronic or something, even though it's just me singing and harmonizing or singing an octave of myself and blending it like in a way. In terms of instrumentation, it's funny because like yesterday so the whole record came out yesterday,
Yeah.
right? On Friday. And there was a listening party for it on Discord, and I was like chatting with people about it, and people mentioned this electronic thing, and I was like a little bit shocked because I actually think of my music as electronic in general, even though it sounds like a rock band or whatever, but the way I construct it is all like Ableton Live and me sampling things, and some of the drums are played or they're played by friends or whatever, but it's all sampled and reconstructed like the drums on Loveless or something. um and so I think it has always been an electronic project in terms of like the way that it's created. um but yeah, I have cooler synths that I'm working with now, and then I also think I kind of like put less of a focus on guitars on the record, which is probably because on the past records there's always been electronics happening,
Yeah.
but they're always like kind of buried within a wall of noisy guitars. um, and there are guitars on this record, but I think I like allowed for more space between instruments, and so like it's not that it's more electronic, it's that like people are able to pick up on that more.
I think the
um,
guitars are actually, they're more prevalent.
yeah,
Just in like they cut through more clearly, and you're not doing as much of the whole wall of sound.
yeah, they're cleaner, there's less
Yeah,
pedals on
yeah,
there. Yeah,
and that makes the electronics sound more electronic. Hence, it makes the music sound more human.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, the instrumentation in general is like pretty much the same. It's just the choices that I'm making in the production or the pedals that I put on something, or the way I'm processing things or mixing it is what has changed. But it's not like I didn't use synths or samples or drum machines on previous records. Um, yeah.
Allow me to nerd out for a second. What kind of drum machines are you using?
Yeah, so actually I don't have any. I have like a lot of hardware synth stuff. And
Okay.
sometimes I do make drum sounds. Like I have a Moog subharmonicon, which can make pretty cool deep bass sounds.
Hmm.
Um, and I have actually a collection of Casios that I use for some of the drum loops from like those cheesy Casio drum loops, but I'll chop them up and affect them. But I actually don't have any like hardware drum machines, like analog drum machines.
Hmm.
A lot of the electronic drums are made from like I always carry a field recorder with me in my backpack,
Hmm.
like a little stereo mic thing, and I record like random sounds, like my car engine like freaking out or something, or like keys jangling or the wind. All of those things I can manipulate into drum samples with like the frequency spectrum. I'll just like chop out like a really low frequency thing and make my own kick drum out of that. So like most of like what would be like a drum machine or sequenced electronic drums are actually made from like physical things that I record and then like manipulate a ton and turn into something. Um, yeah, just because I do feel like well, there are a few 808s on the record, so
Hmm.
I won't say there's not famous drum machines, but I do like to like have my own sound with electronics because it's so easy to copy paste the sound of someone else when you're using like a stock set, a bank of like drum sounds that have been used by another band. I really strive to like to try to make everything something that you haven't heard before, or if it's like an 808, it's like a really obvious reference to something.
And that's something that I think is there's few good examples of that taking place. I think early Nine Inch Nails is a great place to start with that because Trent
Oh my
Reznor did
God,
a lot of
yeah.
that shit too, and he did it really well. And if you think about the way the first Nine Inch Nails album went, the time in which that had taken place, and how archaic the machines he had tape loops and stuff like that back then.
Hmm.
But he was sampling everything from like Jane's Addiction and Prince to the Hellraiser films to like field
Yeah,
recordings, things of that nature, and pornographic films. He uses sound bites from,
yeah,
and making beats and loops out of that.
yeah.
Um,
That's what I'm interested in, is like this kind of referential sampling, or sampling something from the outside world instead of like a specific instrument.
yeah, I think that's there. We have few examples of that, but every time it's done and done well, it really stands out, and
It
it's somehow creepier.
Yeah, it's like an uncanny valley effect or something.
Yeah.
I actually have like I have Pretty Hate Machine in my car. It's like one of the few CDs I've had in there for like the past few months. And so I've been like listening to it like over and over. The production on that is insane for when it came out. Like it sounds like a lot of the things on there sound like they could be made today. Um, he's like a master.
Dude, I bought that record when I was 13 years old in 1989, and I've never been too far away from it. It's one of those few. Same thing with God, Land of Rape and Honey Ministry.
Mm,
Sometimes, like, you'll hear something and you just know, like, I'm going to listen to this for the rest of my life. Public
yeah,
Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet's over there. I will never be without Fear of a Black Planet. There's something again about
yeah.
that.
Also incredibly like constructed samples on that record, and very disturbing sounding.
Yeah, yeah, because it's like the air raid sirens on it, and just it feels as apocalyptic as they intended it to sound.
Yeah,
And that's a feat in and of itself. That whole the Bomb Squad, the producers of that record,
yeah,
brilliant, brilliant people.
yeah.
Um, I would love to hear your take on that. Like if you were to try and construct a hip hop
Yeah,
style
I mean,
record.
I have a lot of stuff like that on my laptop. I always make beats for fun, like
Mhm.
and then never show them to anyone. But I mean, none of it's as good as the Bomb Squad, but I have a million like hip hop beats in my Ableton sessions that I've made.
Yeah, I don't think you can make electronic music without having some sort of affinity for hip hop.
Yeah,
I don't know if it exists. Pretty Hate Machine, what we were just talking about, Public
yeah,
Enemy was a big deal for him. So was
yeah.
NWA. Like Trent Reznor had an ear for that, and that's what makes a well-rounded musician, just allowing yourself to be affected by these disparate sounds and genres, and allowing it to become part of your sound bank.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned NWA, and for me that was like also a really influential project when I was a really little kid. I would go to the library and like check out recordings,
Mhm.
and one day I got like NWA, like the first record, and then uh, Straight Outta Compton, and then I got like Black Flag. I think it's the collection, like the first 4 years, and I
Yeah.
got both of those on the same day because I was like, maybe 11 or something, and I was like, oh, there's like guns on these. It's these album covers are so scary and like badass, and I like burned them both on my computer, and those were both like hugely influential things to me growing up. And I think that, I don't know, it's coming from the same extreme worldview too, or something.
Oh, it is.
I don't know.
I think hip hop and punk rock and thrash metal and industrial music,
Yeah,
even what like the proto goth stuff, it's all the same like mood, the same
yeah,
intent.
impulse,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, I think what Drowse is, it fits in there. It fits into that, just in from the mindset of someone who isn't trying to be counterculture, but is actually being counterculture by not concentrating on trying to be counterculture.
Yeah, thanks.
It sounds convoluted, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too, and I very much appreciate that statement. Yeah,
Absolutely. And if I were to leave my listeners with anything, it would be that I don't get disturbed too much when it comes to music. I mean, I could pick out some examples along my life's journey where songs or albums have left me feeling a little creeped out, little,
hmm,
this album made me feel that way. It creeped me out in a way that your other works, which I've enjoyed, didn't creep me out quite as much. There's something intrinsically creepy about this record that I think people will attach to. They'll make it their own. It'll become a part of their own personal experience. So I really hope people listen to it as much as I have.
yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, that means a lot coming from a horror writer too. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I really appreciate that. I don't think of it as creepy, but I'm glad that you're resonating with it in that way. And
Yeah.
and also maybe like the bipolar thing also ties into that too. Like I haven't been able to find many like at least openly outspoken bipolar artists who sing or write about that stuff. So like that's important for me, and maybe that comes across because you've had similar experiences too.
Absolutely. I think I'm just smelling my own at that point.
Yeah.
But with that, I don't want to tie you up too much longer. But listen, I love this record. I think everyone should, and I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, really great conversation. One of the best interviews I've done. So yeah, thank you.
I appreciate that so much, my friend.
Yeah.
And
Keep in touch, and yeah, please send me your writing.
I really, really love this episode, folks. I say it a lot. I say it almost every time, and I mean it almost every time. I really love this. Kyle's incredible. I respect his music and his vision thoroughly. This was the dark horse of my best of 2022 list that was published in offshelf.net, and it became my favorite record of the year in a matter of weeks. Think about that, because it came out like at the tail end of the year, and there were records that I'd lived with for the entirety of the year and loved, and Softkill was involved there. I love them. So many incredible bands that they just, I'm not saying they're better, but what I am saying is this record aligned more closely with things that I truly feel and fear and grieve, just like he is in grieving within the body of this record. Not to go over it and explain myself further, I'm not going to apologize for what I love, but this record really grabbed me and wouldn't let go. So I didn't try to let it go. That being said, at the top of the episode, I tried to, get people to subscribe or to listen or whatever, and I know that could be annoying, but we're at the 2-year mark almost, and now's where it's time to move it or lose it, and I'm looking to move it. If you love what we're doing here, I'm not saying you have to give us money. I'm not saying you have to do anything, because you don't. But if you really love what we're doing here and want us to continue, any of the above stated modes of appreciation at the top of the show, be it following us, liking, subscribing, any of that would go a long way in showing the rest of the world that this podcast is worth their time. I can't buy ads for that. I can't do anything to anyone to make them listen other than your suggestions, your cosign. If you're out there saying, I like this, I want you to be a part of this too, word of mouth makes or breaks everything. I'll leave you with this. It may be Friday the 13th, and Jason Voorhees may be somewhere at the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake, but the biggest monster is the one that lives inside of your head. Do your best to kill him off. He's been Kyle. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. And this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Stay creepy, everybody. And I'll see you next week. Have a great night.